10 people who mysteriously vanished while traveling. One of the most famous missing person cases in recent memory involved Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old American who vanished during a 2005 school trip to the island of Aruba. She has not been seen since. It's always terrible when someone goes missing, but searching for them becomes particularly difficult when they disappear somewhere they and their loved ones aren't familiar with, such as the following travelers who, after they vanished, sadly never returned home. 1. John Reed. In 1980, 28-year-old John Reed left his hometown of Twin Cities, California, and traveled to Brazil. He was hoping to find the lost city of Acucar, an ancient underground civilization which had supposedly remained undiscovered in the Amazonian jungles for thousands of years. Sandy Reed climbed out of the small airplane and squinted into the cloudless tropical sky. Paint was peeling off the deserted terminal. The Rio Negro, the largest tributary of the mighty Amazon, lay hidden behind a screen of trees. Only a rutted road sliced through the jungle. Somewhere down that road lay the end of a quest, the end, if not the solution, to a mystery that had awakened Reed on countless nights, propelled her across 3 continents and drained her meager savings. The unknown, perhaps unknowable, fate of her brother, John Reed, who in 1980, disappeared somewhere beyond this silent clearing. There had been rumors about him, purported sightings of a tall white man among the Indians, unconfirmable tales of a partial skeleton lying in a hammock beside a river, even allegations of murder. In the worst of her dreams, his frightened voice had told her, "It's not like I thought it would be here." In the Amazon basin, myths are as thick as vines, and its 2.5 million square miles remain today as impervious to the order and logic of civilization as in the year 1500. When Spanish explorer Vicente Yáñez Pinzón recorded first seeing the river. Armies and adventurers have sought their fortunes and their futures here. But the often impenetrable Amazon does not surrender treasures or truths readily. For 5 centuries, many who sought them have left empty-handed or not at all. John Reed, who hungered for some undefined higher knowledge and once wrote a book about UFO sightings, had come to believe in one of the countless stories of lost cities inhabited by ancient tribes, their location known only to a solitary guide. In this case, the guide was a shadowy figure called Tatankanara, the progenitor of this particular tale. Reed was not the only one who thought there was a lost civilization to be found. Herbert Warner, a 24-year-old Swiss who came to the jungle in 1984, was a believer, too. So was Christine Heusser, a middle-aged Swedish yoga instructor whose fascination with Indians led her to Tatankanara in 1987. These 3 shared something else. One by one, they disappeared murdered, some authorities believe while in the company of Tatankanara. Now, after retreating once in fear of her own life, Sandy Reed had come back to the Amazon with a German filmmaker and a Times reporter along to demand the truth. The village of Barcelos, with its 3,000 residents, 10 cars and 1 telephone, lay before her, dirty and unwelcoming, on the edge of the Rio Negro. Television sets blared incongruously through open windows as she walked in jeans, Reebok sneakers and a bush jacket past dilapidated shacks and silent stairs. She stopped to ask directions from an elderly woman hanging wash on a wooden fence. She had only to speak the name of the man she sought. Everyone in Barcelos knew the legendary Tatankanara. Tatankanara claimed to be the chief of a tribe that for 3,000 years supposedly had ruled Acucar, the capital of the lost civilization where descendants of gods were supposed to have lived in stone pyramids and subterranean shelters. He was born, he said, in the jungle near the border with Peru, the son of a German nurse who had been captured by Indians and taken by their chief to be his wife. His tale became the basis for a book, The Chronicle of Acucar, written in 1976, by Karl Brugger, a German journalist based in Rio de Janeiro. The book described Acucar, its people and its history in alluring detail. Over the years, Tatanka parlayed his legend into a business, leading tourists into the Amazon. He took them by boat along endless miles of postcard-perfect rivers and streams. He even served as guide for an elaborate expedition mounted by Jacques Cousteau, the famous French explorer-scientist. Few who went into the wilds with Tatanka believed the story of Acucar. It merely added another layer of exotica to the adventure of a lifetime. For some, however, Tatanka's tale touched deeper chords. John Reed had gone so far as to have what Brugger's book described as the symbol of Acucar, a sun rising out of water. tattooed over his heart. When he vanished into the malarial jungle in 1980, John Reed, tall and blonde, had left behind 4 hope-filled letters, his dog tags and his ticket back to the States. The last person known to have seen the 28-year-old man was his guide, Tatunka. West German police say they suspect that Tatunka murdered Reed, Warner and Heusser, although no charges have been filed and no bodies have been found. The jungle has relinquished little evidence in this strange case. A jaw discovered by Swiss tourists in 1986 was identified through dental records as that of Warner. About Reed, there have been only rumors. About Heusser, not even that. 2. Judy Smith, the 50-year-old nurse and mother of 2, had been wrapped in a blue blanket and placed in a shallow grave, but scavengers had scattered her bones in several directions. She was dressed in hiking gear and thermals, an outfit completely different from the clothes she had been last seen in, but completely appropriate for someone planning a trek in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest, where she was found. An expensive pair of sunglasses and a blue backpack were found hidden nearby in small holes dug in the ground. Judy's family would not recognize the items, or the clothes she had been dressed in, when shown by police. They said Judy was rarely seen without her signature backpack, but it was bright red and nowhere to be found. Police have determined that the sunglasses and the navy and unfamiliar blue bag probably belonged to her killer. Her diamond wedding ring was still on her finger and more than $200 in cash had not been taken, but there was no sign of her wallet and no ID. Detectives classified the case homicide based on punctures and slashes to her bra, indicating she may have been stabbed to death, and the reasoning she hadn't wrapped herself in a blanket or dug her own grave. That was in 1997. Her husband was considered an improbable candidate for murder and died less than a decade later. Based on at least 12 unconfirmed sightings of Judy in the days after her disappearance, in locations several hundred kilometers apart, detectives believe she may have voluntarily traveled to the area before being murdered. Detectives were mindful of the fact that, just 16 from where Judy's body was found, a woman had been raped, murdered and tied to a tree. Here's what investigators believe happened in the 36 or so hours leading up to the disappearance of Judy Smith. On April 9, 1997, Judy and her corporate lawyer husband of 8 months, Jeffrey, arrived at Boston's Logan International Airport. As they checked in for their 1:30 p.m. flight to Philadelphia, Judy realized she'd forgotten to bring photo ID. She would have to return home to retrieve her driver's license. Jeffrey had an appointment scheduled for that afternoon, so the couple agreed he would go ahead. Judy would catch a later flight and meet him at the DoubleTree Hotel where they were booked for the week. She made the 7:30 and took a cab to the hotel, meeting Jeffrey in the lobby and surprising him with a bunch of flowers by way of apology. The pair retired to their room and discussed their plans for the following day. Jeffrey told police Judy planned to visit 2 historic landmarks, Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. Jeffrey, on the other hand, would be tied up for most of the day with conferences and workshops. They planned to visit old friends in New Jersey at the end of the week, but until then they'd agreed to let the other do their own thing by day, reuniting in the evenings. Judy was still fast asleep when he rose early the next morning, and so he slipped downstairs for something to eat. When he returned shortly before 9 a.m., Judy was in the shower. He suggested she try the complimentary breakfast, and she playfully joked about heading down just as she was, naked and dripping wet. Jeffrey laughed and headed off to the opening presentation. It was the last time he ever saw his wife alive. By 5:30 p.m., Jeffrey was back in their hotel room as arranged, but there was no sign of Judy. "I was a little concerned," he told the Philadelphia City paper, "but I thought maybe we had mixed signals, and that she thought she was supposed to proceed to the cocktails party, which was due to begin at 6 p.m. So I went down to the room where the cocktails party was, and I kinda floated back and forth between the room where the cocktails party was and our room for the next, half or 3/4 of an hour. At 6:15 p.m., he told the concierge he was concerned something had happened to his wife, and the staffer began ringing around the local hospitals. That night Jeffrey searched the streets in a cab, looking for Judy. He called police, but they told him he had to wait 24 hours before he could report her missing. She would never return, but for the next few days there would be numerous sightings of her, in Easton, Philadelphia, then New Jersey, and, after her body was found, witnesses would claim to have seen her alive and well in Asheville, which is just 15 kilometers from the crime scene. On September 7, 1997, a father and son hunting deer at Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina came across Judy Smith's shallow grave. They found her near the Stony Point picnic area near Chestnut Creek at about 4 p.m., her partially buried skeleton and bones scattered over about 100 meters by animals. The skeleton still had on long, insulated underwear, blue jeans and hiking boots, Buncombe County Sheriff Bobby Medford told reporters at the time. There was nothing in the pockets, no wallet, no identification at all. Nearby, investigators found a blue vinyl backpack filled with winter clothing and $80 cash. A shirt was buried nearby, with $87 in the pockets. Her bra had puncture holes and cuts, leading investigators to suspect she had been stabbed to death. 2 years earlier, the body of a woman was found tied to a tree in the woods just a few kilometers from Judy's crime scene. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The remains were sent to the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Laboratory. Forensic testing revealed the bones belonged to a white female between the ages of 40 and 55 and had been at the site for up to 2 years. But it was the revelation that the victim had suffered chronic arthritis in the left knee that would lead investigators to her true identity. The medical examiner did not record a cause of death. According to her adult children from a previous marriage, and other family members, Judy loved Jeffrey and the pair got along very well. The pair had met a decade earlier while she was caring for his elderly father at home while he recovered from surgery to remove a tumor from his throat. Police investigated him as a potential suspect but could find evidence to suggest his involvement. His alibis checked out and he was too morbidly obese to have hiked the rugged trail through the woods to where her body was found. Sheriff Medford believes Judy may have wanted time out from her marriage, or even tried to start a new life by heading for the hills, literally, but that somewhere along the way she met someone who killed her. Others have theorized Judy may have crossed paths with a serial killer who was operating in the area at the time called Gary Michael Hilton. Officers did look for links at the time but came up with nothing. In the meantime, the question of how Judy Smith ended up dead so many hundreds of kilometers from where she was last seen remains unanswered. 3. Frank Lenz. Shortly after William Sackteleben and Thomas Allen began their perilous ride across Asia in 1892, another young man set off on his own round-the-world trip. Frank Lenz, a 25-year-old cyclist from Pittsburgh, had landed an assignment from Outing magazine to make the 20,000-mile journey. Quitting his dreary job as a bookkeeper, he embarked on the ride alone, traveling across the U.S. to Japan and from there to China, Burma, India and Persia. He planned a final leg across Europe. Instead he disappeared, probably near a remote Turkish river, as the world fretted about his fate. After a lengthy delay, the penny-pinching editor of Outing finally took action, hiring William Sackteleben, now safely home but still eager for adventure, to travel to Turkey and figure out what happened. It was a dangerous quest. The roads and defiles were treacherous, Kurdish thugs were roaming the land, and a wave of Armenian massacres was underway. A foreigner on a still unfamiliar bicycle, loaded with gear, would be a tempting target for thieves. In his book The Lost Cyclist, the epic tale of an American adventurer and his mysterious disappearance, author David V. Hurley cleverly and compellingly traces all three threads of the Sackteleben-Allen Lenz story. First, he reviews the Sackteleben-Allen ride and its triumphal ending, interspersing that account with the tale of Lenz and his hopeful start. Then he describes Sacktelben's dogged pursuit of the truth despite cultural, bureaucratic and linguistic barriers. Hurley has been relentless himself, tracking down information about the three cyclists from diaries, newspapers, government records and archives. During his research, he turned up new information, including Sacktelben's papers at the Museum of Natural History of Los Angeles, which also has his Kodak camera and the Humber bicycle he used to cross Asia. The London Science Museum has Allen's. UCLA holds some 400 fragile nitrate negatives, which it plans to scan soon, taken by Sackteleben and Allen during their world tour. The book, which came out in 2010, made the publisher's weekly list of that year's top 100 titles. A New York Times review called it grippingly detailed and noted Hurley's ability to write from inside the heads of the cyclists. Certainly, no one knows cycling better than Hurley, who earlier wrote Bicycle, The History, winner of the 2004 Award for Excellence in the History of Science from a division of the Association of American Publishers. At the center of The Lost Cyclist is Lenz, the only son of a widowed mother who chafed at his stepfather's mistreatment and longed to be off on his own. His ticket to independence was the high wheeler, and he was the dashing, slightly reckless, star of the Allegheny Cyclers, the largest of 3 cycling clubs in the Pittsburgh area at the time, with about 30 members. Blue-eyed, with sandy blonde hair, he was a young man in the prime of life, beaming with joy as he straddles his beloved two-wheeler, writes Holloway. After honing his skills in regional races, Lenz moved in a new direction, long-distance touring, with a thrilling 1,200-mile jaunt from Pittsburgh to New Orleans in the summer of 1891. He also discovered a second great love, photography, acquiring a bulky wooden box camera and a mount. With a timer that allowed him to capture himself, he was set to become a touring reporter, if only a major magazine would send him on an exotic journey. In this ambition, he had an idol, Thomas Stevens, who had circumnavigated the globe by bicycle from 1884 to 1887, traveling through 25 countries. After his trip, described in harrowing installments and outing, Stevens had become a successful author and lecturer. Lenz simply could not fathom, wrote Holloway, how any pursuit could be more exciting or satisfying than touring the world on a bicycle. In the early 1890s, the bicycling landscape was shifting quickly and dramatically. The conventional high-wheeler, with its huge wheel in front and tiny one in back, gave way to the modern safety bike with refinements such as lighter weight frames and pneumatic tires. Clubs of avid young men were springing up all over the United States, as bicycling became the sport of the middle class, not just wealthy Easterners. In 1892, Lenz's dream of a round-the-world assignment came true. Outing editor James H. Werman hired him to travel across the globe on a new Victor safety bike, sending in reports and photos every other month. On May 15th, before an adoring crowd, Lenz left Pittsburgh. 3 weeks later, Outing gave him an official send-off in New York City, where he began his dash west across the country. Asked whether he was nervous about making it home, Lenz answered stoutly, "I have nothing but the most pleasurable anticipation of my trip abroad. Besides, I have never encountered anything yet that I have not overcome." In Japan, he encountered interesting sights, such as ancient pagodas, rice paddies and his first red light district. The hotels were spare but clean, and the people, for the most part, friendly. But in China, where he narrowly missed meeting the returning Sackteleben and Allen, he encountered bitter poverty, terrible roads and anti-foreign fervor. Mapping a route along the telegraph line so he could find shelter with operators, he began his trek, filled with foreboding. Soon he had some close calls. One day he confronted a mob of farm workers, driven into a frenzy by the sight of a foreigner on a strange, silver device. Dodging blows, Lenz suddenly had the sense to act the clown, dissolving tension and gaining permission to pass. Often he found shelter and advice from American missionaries who, almost to a man, advised him to abandon his trip. But he made it through China, and then Burma, India and Persia. As he left Tabriz, determined to cycle through a lawless region of Turkey, he wrote to Werman, "I must confess to a feeling of homesickness. I am very, very tired of being a stranger. I long for the day which will see me again on my native hearthstone and my wanderings at an end." When another cyclist named William Sackteleben traveled to Erzurum to search for Lenz, he uncovered information that Lenz may have been passing through a small Turkish village in the Kurdistan region, where he inadvertently insulted a Kurdish chief. In retaliation, the chief supposedly ordered bandits to murder Lenz and bury his body. The alleged killers were charged with Lenz's death, but most of them fled the area or died before they could be imprisoned. The Turkish government eventually agreed to pay compensation to Lenz's family, but his body was never found. 4. Leo Whitaker. Even though he was 86 years old, Leo Whitaker still lived a very active life. Leo had been married to his wife, Virginia, for 55 years, and they both belonged to a Christian organization called Maranatha Volunteers International. By 2001, the Whitakers had worked with Maranatha on 40 humanitarian trips. For their 41st trip, the couple left their home in Bowdoin, North Dakota to accompany the organization to Tebucan Hot Springs, Costa Rica. On November 8, Leo rested on a bench while his wife went off to wade in the hot springs. When Virginia returned about half an hour later, her husband was gone. "The frustrating part is we have not a clue where he was or what happened," said Leo's son-in-law, Delvine Hansen, a Harvey dentist. Leo and Virginia Whitaker, 75, retired Bowdoin farmers, were in Costa Rica on their 41st trip with Maranatha Volunteers International, a Seventh-day Adventist organization, said Joanne Hansen, Hansen's wife and Leo's daughter. The Whitakers and other participants pay their own way on these 2 to 3 week trips, and have gone to such places as India and Nicaragua and Peru to build churches and schools, Hansen said. This time, down in Costa Rica, the couple had helped paint a school and 2 churches in a suburb northwest of San Jose. On November 18, they were moving on to another project, but first stopped to eat at the Tebucan Resort, an area of hot springs. "Mom decided to go into the pools," Joanne said. "Dad didn't want to and sat down by the bus on a bench. He seemed fine and was talkative. They assumed that after sitting, he nodded off to sleep, because he could nap anywhere. When he woke up may have been momentarily confused." Leo apparently started looking for his wife at the resort. Hotel workers remember him. "People saw him ask people if they knew where his wife was at," Joanne said. Then guards at the gated resort reported that he walked up to them and asked if it was okay to leave. They let him out, and the last time the guards saw him he was walking down the main road. But Joanne doesn't know what reports to believe, because how does a human being totally vanish? She said he didn't like to walk. "He wouldn't go for a walk. That's not my dad. He walked rather slowly, and if he left the resort, he must have gotten picked up by someone," she said. Within about 15 minutes of the guards seeing him, a friend drove 10 miles down the road and saw nothing, and her father wouldn't have walked off the road, Joanne said. There was a steep volcanic hillside on one side and fences, which fence in the resort, on the other, and it was raining hard. "It wasn't conducive to go hiking," Delvine said. Joanne said her dad only had $4 in a pocket and had on a $10 watch. Virginia carried the money. "Dad was a farmer. He wasn't used to carrying a wallet in his pocket," she said. Joanne and a brother, Rod Whitaker, flew to Costa Rica and stayed for 12 days. A personal friend of the family, Dick Hild, is still down there looking, but still nothing. Joanne said the Red Cross came out and searched for 4 or 5 days. Local police also hired hunters to go through area, but no clues resulted. Her father is described as being 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing 145 pounds, bald, and with grayish blonde hair, what's left of it. He has blue eyes, wears glasses and has hearing aids in both ears. She said the batteries would be dead by now. He was wearing a red and blue plaid shirt, a navy blue jacket and a white baseball cap with a farm implement logo on it. Joanne said she never really worried about her parents taking these trips. The trips were basically well set up. She said farming was his work and hobby, and so when he retired 2 years ago he didn't have any hobbies. The Maranatha trips turned into his hobby. He was a workaholic, she said. To go someplace to work, which the Maranatha trips allowed him to do, was heavenly for him. Some people go on cruises, Joanne said. Her parents went on Maranatha trips instead to help people, Joanne said, and the couple made very special friends. You got special people on these trips, Joanne said. These are people that gave 3 or 4 weeks of their time, paid their own lodging, and when there wasn't money enough to pay for pews or windows, they passed the hat. Her dad didn't have great construction skill. He worked as a gopher boy, he called himself, she said. Her mom became good at doing finishing work on the brickwork. She said there have been trips that have been cancelled because of unrest in the country. For this particular trip, her parents considered not going because 2 months ago he had gotten a pacemaker because of an erratic heartbeat. They tried to get their money back for the airfare, couldn't, and because Leo started feeling better they decided to go. Hansen took them to Bismarck Airport at 3:30 a.m. on November 13th and remembers she told her dad she loved him. She last saw him sitting down, putting shoes back on that security had made him take off. She said the American embassy has promised to keep the case open, and a Costa Rican who is affiliated with Maranatha is committed to looking for him. Virginia and Leo have been married 55 years. Virginia met Leo when she got a job as a cook for the Bowdoin farm operated by Leo and relatives. I came and never left, she would laughingly tell Joanne. The couple met in the summer, and were married in November. They are so compatible. Joanne said, "I come from a family that didn't fight. I would be hard put to tell you 3 or 4 times my folks fought. Now they are thousands of miles apart." She said family members are up and down, doing the best they can. "It's so absurd, the situation," she said. "There's no word for it." 5. Karen Denise Wells, the family of an Oklahoma woman last seen in Middlesex Township in 1994, is joining investigators in urging people to come forward if they know anything at all about the disappearance of Karen Denise Wells. "I don't know if they'll ever find her," said Joanne Wells of her cousin's daughter, who was known as Denise. "But," she said Wednesday, she hopes that getting people talking about the case again will turn up a piece of information that will allow investigators to finish the puzzle so the family can finally get some closure. "There's some inconsistencies in there," she said Wednesday of a timeline she has assembled using publicly reported information about the case. "But if you look at it close enough, the answer may be there. I know and feel in my heart, as a mother, that there is someone out there that knows something," Denise's mother, Deorma Wells, said in an email to the Sentinel. She wants that person to know that she can forgive a past inability to come forward, she said, but still pleads for the information. "Please come forward for Denise's son, William, and yourself, so you do not have to live with the guilt any longer," Deorma Wells said. "This young boy needs a hero, even if you have made a mistake." Investigators held a press conference Wednesday to remind the public that it has been 15 years since the disappearance of Denise Wells, who was then 23 and the single mother of a young child. "She may still be alive," they said, but they consider that unlikely, as does Wells' family. Locally there have been persons of interest in the case. State Police spokesman Trooper Carl Schmiemer said, "Out-of-state people have been scrutinized as well," he said, "but there isn't enough information to identify anyone as a suspect." Wells had been driving from her home to New Bergen, NJ, to visit Melissa Shepard, a longtime friend of hers who was working as an exotic dancer and according to Wells' family was having personal problems. Cumberland County District Attorney David Freed said investigators have repeatedly interviewed people who we believe know more than they have told us. "Getting a break from the physical evidence available is a long shot," Freed said. "Police have chased down every lead they had over the years," he said, and even went so far as to use ground-penetrative radar at the Pike Motel, where Wells was last seen. However, he said, over the past few years local law enforcement officials have solved several cases at least as old as Wells. "What is consistent is that law enforcement continued to work on these cases," Freed said, crediting a state police policy of checking in on even long dormant cases every 60 or 90 days. "We never give up. Investigators don't necessarily need to find Wells or her body to crack the case," Freed said, "but they do need more information than they currently have." For instance, Freed said, police believe there were indications of criminal activity in Wells' rental car, a white 1993 Plymouth Acclaim that was discovered abandoned and out of gas more than an hour away on a remote stretch of Route 274 near Tuscarora State Park in Perry County before 6 a.m. that day. Freed declined to specify what those indications were, but police have said in the past that they discovered a small amount of marijuana in the car. "That's where the time that has passed since Wells' disappearance may help investigators," Schmiemer said. "The statute of limitations has expired on smaller crimes that may have been involved in what happened, such as theft of a vehicle," he said, and police hope that knowing that may inspire people who have previously been afraid to come forward with information to do so now. As for the inconsistencies Joanne Wells noted, police have long puzzled over them. They include the following. Someone called Melissa Shepard from a payphone at the Sheets Market in Middlesex and spoke to her voicemail about 17 hours before Wells is believed to have arrived in the area. Before she checked into the hotel that day, Wells was seen in Seaforstown, which is about an hour closer to New Jersey than Middlesex is, and then traveling the opposite direction in Burnville a few hours later. After telling Shepard that she got lost several times that day, Wells checked into the motel and made arrangements for Shepard to come meet her there. Shepard reported arriving with a boyfriend, but police said she actually showed up with 2 men she met at a bar where she worked and went ballistic before it was even clear her friend was missing. Wells' car had logged about 700 miles more than it should have during the trip. Wells had been dating a married man, and about 6 months after she disappeared his wife reported receiving a call from a person who claimed to be Wells and said, "Tell Mike I'm not coming home, I'm already married." Investigators do not believe Wells made the call. Police have said one of the reasons they do not believe Wells is still alive is that her son William, whom she left with her parents and who is now 16, has not had any contact from her. Denise had a beautiful, heartwarming smile, her laughter and her ability to make people feel loved and comfortable, Diorma Wells said. She loved her son so much and was truly devoted. She was devoted to her family and friends as she proved in this trip to save her friend, Melissa. Diorma Wells said she has no idea what could have happened to her daughter but that the family still feel helpless not knowing. "I don't think it ever gets easier," she said. "The wide range of emotions is unbelievable and sometimes hard to bear. But the only thing we have to concentrate on is our wonderful grandson and his future, making sure he finds his path in life." 6. Charles Horvath. In 1989, 20-year-old Charles Horvath decided to leave his native England and travel to Canada, where he would spend several months hitchhiking across the country. By May 11, Charles had arrived in the province of British Columbia, and was staying at a campground in Kelowna. He sent a fax to his mother, Denise Allen, claiming he would make arrangements to meet her in Hong Kong for his 21st birthday. However, months passed and Denise never heard anything from her son. Since Charles had always maintained frequent contact with her up until this point, she became worried. She decided to travel to British Columbia in order to find him. Denise discovered that Charles had left behind his tent and all his possessions at the campground when he abruptly vanished. After posting up missing person flyers and publicizing Charles's disappearance, Denise returned to her hotel one night to find a note which read, "I seen him May 26th. We were partying and 2 people knocked him out, but he died. His body is in a lake by the bridge." It's one of Kelowna's oldest unsolved mysteries. A young British backpacker, Charles Horvath, vanished without a trace in May of 1989. In the spring of '89 he was here in Kelowna. He was actually registered at a local campsite and shortly thereafter lost contact with his family and hasn't been seen since, said Kelowna RCMP CST Chris Clark. But even after 25 years, the case isn't cold according to police. "The file is active. It will remain active until Charles is found," said CST Clark. The then 20-year-old Horvath disappeared 3 weeks after arriving in Kelowna. He was staying at the tiny town campground and was last seen on May 26, 1989, cashing a check at the Orchard Park Royal Bank. 4 years afterwards, his mother Denise Allen traveled from the UK to Kelowna on the anniversary of his disappearance. In May of 2010 she launched a billboard campaign in West Kelowna, hoping someone would come forward with information. "I just hope to tell the world that he is still missing. We still don't have him home and the answer is here in Kelowna, and to remind those who know the answer that I am still searching and I will until end of my life," Allen told Global Okanagan in 2010. "I never would have believed I would be doing it 21 years later," Allen continued. "I have reached a stage now where this will be my last trip." Police won't confirm whether Horvath is dead and therefore if foul play is suspected. "There's obviously concern after so many years of not being in contact with somebody, whether it's a recovery at this point or not," said CST Clark. But Allen believes her son was murdered. "Why did you take my child? What day did you kill him? Where did you put him? What did he do wrong to not be able to come home?" Allen said at a Kelowna RCMP news conference in 2009. While there have been few recent leads in the case, CST Clark told Global Okanagan a senior officer is now reviewing the file to see if anything may have been missed that could further the investigation. The RCMP is again asking anyone with information to come forward. Divers searched this lake and did not find Charles's body. However, Denise soon received another note claiming they were looking on the wrong side of the bridge. After another search, police did find a body. The victim was tentatively identified as Charles, but it turned out to be a local resident who had committed suicide. However, Denise did receive confirmation from a witness that Charles had attended an all-night party at the campground right before he disappeared. Nevertheless, his disappearance remains unsolved 25 years later. 7. Ettore Majorana. Scientist. Ettore Majorana was born in Italy in 1906. He famously went missing, presumed dead on March 27, 1938, and aged 32. It was claimed he disappeared, or vanished, suddenly under very mysterious circumstances while going by ship from Palermo to Naples. Almost 20 years later he was photographed in Argentina, still looking the same age as he was in 1938. Whilst rumors of his death circulated, nothing was ever proved, until 2011. On March 2011, the Rome Attorney's Office announced an inquiry into a strange statement made by a witness about a meeting with Majorana in Buenos Aires in the years after World War II, in which he claims Majorana disclosed a number of major scientific discoveries. The witness also claimed that when he went back to meet Majorana a second time, he had disappeared, and could therefore not provide more details on the scientific discoveries. On June 7, 2011, Italian media reported that the Carabinieri's RIS had analyzed a photograph of a man taken in Argentina in 1955, finding 10 points of similarity with Majorana's face. They stated the picture was almost certainly Majorana, whom has vanished almost 20 years before the picture was taken. The odd thing was, Majorana looked almost the same age in the pictures from 1938, as he did in 1955. The Carabinieri made no comments about his lack of aging. Ettore Majorana was a brilliant scientist, engineer and mathematician, as well as a theoretical physicist, who worked on neutrino masses. The Majorana equation and Majorana fermions are named after him. In 1937, Majorana predicted that a stable particle could exist in nature that was both matter and antimatter. In our everyday experience, there is matter, which is abundant in our known universe, and antimatter, which is very rare. Should matter and antimatter meet, they both annihilate, disappearing in a flash of energy. Did he try some strange experiment that had him disappearing in a flash of energy, only to reappear, instantly in a flash, 20 years later? Rumors have been swirling around about his disappearance since the very moment he failed to step off the boat that he was spotted boarding in March 1938. However, even this single concrete detail in the case, that Majorana stepped onto a boat, is in dispute. Some believe he deliberately placed a decoy on the boat. Others think the boat trip was simply a fabrication of those he left behind, who knew of his true fate, but wanted some evidence of his disappearance. Nobel Prize winner, Fermi, when discussing Majorana's disappearance, famously said, "Ettore was too intelligent. If he has decided to disappear, no one will be able to find him. Not in this time, or another." It looks like he may have been right. Was Majorana the first-time traveler? After analyzing the man in the photo and comparing it to photographs of Majorana, investigators found enough compelling similarities to believe they might be the same person. The investigation into Ettore Majorana's disappearance is still ongoing, but the full story about what happened remains unknown. 8. Devin Williams. It was Memorial Day weekend, 1995. Arizona's Dondo National Forest was a popular getaway for families and campers. The last thing anyone would have expected to see was a 10-ton semi-truck crashing through the woods. The driver of the truck was Devin Williams, a 29-year-old father of 3. Two campers had a frighteningly close experience as Devin's 18-wheeler barreled towards their SUV. Lynn Yarrington was an eyewitness. There was no expression on his face at all. He didn't attempt to slow down, or look over to see if they needed help or anything. He just kept on going. Later that day another eyewitness, Charles Hall, came upon the 18-wheeler stalled in a field. Hall recalls the trucker's last words being, "I'm going to jail." "I envisioned a hostage situation, a hijacking, kidnapping, whatever, a jailbreak, maybe, and someone had a gun on someone in the cab." He made no effort to keep us there, no effort to ask for help, do anything for him. Late Sunday afternoon, Deputy Dean Wells followed up on a report that a 48-foot semi was stranded in the forest. When Deputy Wells arrived on the scene he found the truck's cargo to be completely intact. The driver was nowhere to be found, and when he checked the National Crime Computer, there was no record of either a missing truck or driver. The inside of the cab appeared to be very clean and well maintained. According to Deputy Wells, there was no reason to believe foul play was involved. Devin Williams was a loving husband and the father of 3. By all accounts, he was not the type to dump a fully loaded rig in the middle of the forest. However, the abandoned truck was indeed his. 6 days before his wild ride in the forest, Devon had left his home in Kansas and headed west. It was a route he had taken many times. After delivering his load in California, Devon checked in with his boss, Tom Wilson. "Looking back, I can't see anything out of the ordinary to make me suspect anything. Everything indicated it was just a very normal trip in the time frame and that everything's going real good." On Saturday evening, the day before his disappearance, Devon telephoned headquarters for the last time. He complained of being unable to sleep, yet was determined to get back on the road. By Sunday morning he was barreling through the woods of the Tonto National Forest, miles from any highway. To this day, no one knows why, and none of the theories make sense. Reports of Devon's disoriented behavior and incoherence prompted suspicions that he was on drugs. But according to Tom Wilson, that was not the case with Devon. "We'd had no drug problem with him. He had passed his drug tests and everything." Devon's wife, Mary Lou Williams, is confident that something must have happened to her husband. The young couple had recently purchased a house and, according to Mary Lou, were at the happiest point in their marriage. It was unlike Devon to go off his route, let alone be that irrational. If Devon Williams didn't run off, where was he? Foot patrols, canine searches and rescue teams all came up empty-handed. Hunters and hikers in the area never reported finding so much as a bone fragment or a scrap of clothing. Nearly 2 years after Devon's disappearance, hikers discovered a human skull, just a half-mile from where he had last been seen. Dental records confirmed the skull belonged to Devon Williams. The cause of his death and his strange behavior is still an unsolved mystery. 9. Virginia Carpenter. Carpenter was last seen in Denton, Texas on June 1, 1948. She left her home in Texarkana, Texas and took a train to Denton, 6 hours away. She packed a brown steamer trunk, a matching makeup case and a black pasteboard hat box. At the station she took a taxicab to Texas State College for Women, TSCW, now called Texas Women's University. She was planning to complete a summer term there. Carpenter had previously attended the University of Arkansas and studied journalism, but transferred to the TSCW because she decided to enter into a career in the sciences instead. She aspired to a career as laboratory technician. Carpenter first enrolled in the TSCW for the 1945-46 school year, then took a break from school to help her sick mother and save up money to pay for her education. She attended Texarkana Junior College for a time, then enrolled in the 1948 summer term at TSCW. She planned to begin training there as laboratory technician in the autumn, but disappeared just before the summer term began. The cab driver, Edgar Ray Jack Zachary, later stated he stopped in front of Brackenridge Hall at 9 p.m. and Carpenter gave the driver a ticket for her trunk and paid him $1 so he would fetch it for her from the train station the next day. After getting out of the cab, Carpenter approached 2 young men standing near a yellow or cream-colored convertible car, possibly a Pontiac. One of the men was tall and the other is described as chunky. Carpenter appeared to know them and began to speak to them, and the cab driver drove away. She never checked into her dormitory, Brackenridge Hall, and has never been heard from again. Some of Carpenter's former boyfriends stated she became infatuated easily and speculated she ran away with a lover, but her family did not believe she would have left without telling them. She had previously been engaged, but broke off the relationship just weeks prior to the wedding. Carpenter's boyfriend passed a polygraph in connection with her disappearance, but authorities learned Zachary had a record for petty crimes and a reputation for being abusive. He was charged with attempted rape in 1957, but the charge was dropped after the victim asked authorities not to prosecute. Zachary's wife stated he had been home with her from 10 p.m. onwards on June 1, but 10 years after Carpenter's disappearance, his wife told police she had lied to them and her husband had not actually arrived home until 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. on June 2. Zachary died in 1984. He was never charged in connection with Carpenter's case, but he remains a suspect, although he passed 2 polygraphs in her case. In the winter and spring of 1946, 5 young people were murdered in Lovers Lanes in Carpenter's hometown of Texarkana. The crimes are believed to have all been committed by the same person. The murderer was never caught and became known as the Texarkana Phantom Killer. Carpenter was acquainted with 3 of the victims. Authorities investigated to see if there was a link between her disappearance and the Texarkana slayings, but they found no evidence to support this theory. In 1998, Authorities received a tip that two men had raped and killed Carpenter shortly after her disappearance and buried her body in a dam at a stock tank near the Texas Women's University campus. The suspects were both deceased by 1998, and were not publicly identified. Authorities searched the dam after receiving the information, but uncovered no evidence. Numerous leads and possible sightings of Carpenter have surfaced throughout the decades since her disappearance, but no evidence has been uncovered and none of the accounts have been proven. Her father died prior to her disappearance and her mother died in 1980, and she has no siblings, but 3 of her cousins still hope to get answers in her case. Carpenter was declared legally dead in 1955. Her disappearance remains unsolved. 10. Benjamin Bathurst. Benjamin Bathurst was a British diplomatic convoy who disappeared in Germany under strange circumstances in 1809, in the midst of the Napoleonic Wars. He was the third son of Henry Bathurst, Bishop of Norwich. Bathurst is reported to have suddenly disappeared on or about November 25, 1809. His vanishing sparked much debate and speculation concerning his ultimate fate, as his disappearance was unexplained and particularly sudden. Some considered it to be a supernatural vanishing. Recent research suggests the circumstances of Bathurst's disappearance were not that wildly exaggerated. However, it is now suggested he was almost certainly murdered and his body disposed of. The strange events surrounding his disappearance. On 25th of November 1809, Benjamin Bathurst and his attendant were in the middle of making a long and dangerous journey carriage across Europe. That evening they had stopped for refreshments in a small inn at the town of Perlberg, west of Berlin. They had intended to stop for just an hour or so. Concerned about standing out as rich British, they both been traveling under false names, Baron de Koch and Fisher. Records show that sometime between 9 and 10 in the evening Benjamin Bathurst and his loyal attendant Fisher were considering if they should set off in the carriage and continue the long journey they had planned for that day. The carriage was indeed ready up with fresh horses and set to roll. However, for some reason, they decided that it was too late to travel such a long distance, so decided to retire to bed in the inn. Before they did, they had to deal with their horses and carriage. Bathurst left the inn they had stopped at first, with his attendant less than a few meters behind him to unharness his horses. Records show he climbed into the carriage after examining the horses. Bathurst's attendant followed the diplomat into the carriage just a few moments later. However, when he got to the door of the vehicle there was no sign of Bathurst. The attendant quickly looked, but failed to find any trace of the missing Baron. He then went back inside the inn and gathered a large group of locals to help him search for the missing diplomat. The group helped him search the local area for over an hour, but there was no sign of the British diplomat anywhere. Vanished without a trace. On December 16 a report came in from 2 local women who had been taking a walk through the nearby woods. They had come across a pair of pants which were later proven to belong to Bathurst. The pants had 2 bullet holes shot through them, but there was a lack of any blood evidence. This indicated to authorities that the clothing had been shot after it was taken off the diplomat. Bathurst's wife eventually got wind of his disappearance and traveled to Perlberg herself to find out what had happened to her husband. Once she arrived, she immediately put up a high reward offer for anyone who had information on her husband's whereabouts. The reward was cancelled after several days due to the amount of hoax responses from local opportunists.